why Trump wanted his name on the Kennedy Center. For decades, the Kennedy Center has stood as one of America's most important cultural landmarks. Located on the banks of the Potomac River in Washington, D.C., it is not simply a performing arts venue. It is a national symbol. Presidents attend events there, where famous artists perform there. Foreign dignitaries visit there, and perhaps most importantly, it carries the name of one of America's most iconic presidents, John F. Kennedy. For generations, the Kennedy Center represented something larger than politics. It represented culture, art, music, theater, and a shared piece of American identity. That is why a recent controversy involving Donald Trump shocked Washington, because suddenly one of America's most recognizable cultural institutions found itself at the center of a political storm. The conflict began after Trump allies gained significant influence over the Kennedy Center's governing board. Soon afterward, discussions emerged regarding changes to the institution, and then came the decision that ignited national outrage. Plans were approved to place Trump's name on the building. Supporters saw the move as recognition. Critics saw it as something entirely different. To supporters, Trump had become one of the most influential political figures in modern American history. They argued his impact on the country justified greater recognition. Many viewed the proposal as a natural acknowledgement of his role in reshaping American politics, but opponents immediately pushed back. For them, the issue was not whether Trump was important. The issue was whether a cultural institution dedicated to John F. Kennedy should suddenly become associated with a living political figure. The Kennedy Center was never intended to function as a political monument. It was created as a memorial, a tribute, a place dedicated to preserving the legacy of President Kennedy through the arts. Critics argue that replacing or overshadowing that legacy fundamentally changed the purpose of the institution itself, and that is where the controversy exploded, because this was no longer about a name, it was about ownership of history. Who gets remembered? Who decides what national symbols mean? And can political power reshape institutions that were created for entirely different purposes? The debate quickly spread beyond Washington. Historians became involved. Legal scholars joined the discussion. Former Kennedy Center supporters expressed concern. Political commentators framed the dispute as part of a larger pattern. Some argued Trump was attempting to leave permanent marks across America's most recognizable institution, the White House Ballroom Project. Discussions about monuments, changes to federal buildings, and now the Kennedy Center. Taken individually, each controversy seemed manageable. Together, they created a larger narrative, a narrative about legacy. Supporters viewed Trump as a builder, a reformer, a president willing to reshape institutions rather than preserve them exactly as they were. Critics viewed the same actions as something more personal, a desire to place Trump's identity onto national landmarks. That perception fueled growing resistance, because once a nation's symbols become political battlegrounds, every change becomes controversial, every decision becomes ideological, every building becomes part of a larger cultural war. And nowhere was that conflict more visible than at the Kennedy Center. A place once known primarily for music and performance had suddenly become one of the most politically charged buildings in America. And the biggest fight was still ahead, because soon a federal judge would step into the battle, and the future of Trump's name on the Kennedy Center would be decided not by politicians, but by the courts. The judge who stopped Trump's cultural takeover, the legal battle over the Kennedy Center, was never really about a sign on a building. It was about power, authority, and who controls America's national symbols. After plans emerged to place Trump's name on the Kennedy Center, opponents quickly filed legal challenges. The argument was simple. The board may oversee operations. The board may manage programming, but the board does not have unlimited authority, especially when dealing with a national institution created by Congress. That distinction became the center of the courtroom fight. Lawyers opposing the move argued that the Kennedy Center exists because Congress established it, Congress named it, Congress defined its purpose, and therefore Congress alone possesses the authority to fundamentally alter its identity. Supporters of the board's actions disagree. They argue that governing bodies routinely make decisions regarding facilities, naming rights, and institutional development. From their perspective, the changes fell within administrative authority. The conflict soon landed before a federal judge, and when the ruling arrived, it sent shockwaves through Washington. The court concluded that the board had exceeded its authority. The judge ruled that changing the name in this manner violated the law. The reasoning was significant. According to the court, national institutions created through congressional action cannot simply be redefined by internal boards whenever political leadership changes. If that principle were abandoned, future administrations could repeatedly rename and reshape public institutions based on political preferences. One administration could rename a building, the next administration could rename it again. National symbols would become political trophies. The court viewed that possibility as dangerous. As a result, Trump's name was ordered removed. The ruling immediately became a major political story. Supporters of Trump criticized the decision. Many argued it reflected political bias rather than legal reasoning. Others claimed the court was preventing recognition of a president who had transformed American politics. Meanwhile, opponents celebrated the outcome. For them, the decision protected the original purpose of the Kennedy Center. More importantly, they believe it established limits on political influence over national cultural institutions. But the significance of the ruling extends far beyond one building, because the Kennedy Center case raises a larger question. What happens when politics expands into culture? For decades, Americans have fought over elections, taxes, immigration, foreign policy. But increasingly, the battle is moving into museums, monuments, schools, libraries, and cultural institutions. These places shape how history is remembered, and whoever influences them gains enormous power over public memory. That is why this dispute attracted so much attention. It was never just about Donald Trump, and it was never just about John F. Kennedy. It was about whether political leaders should be able to reshape national symbols according to their own legacy. Supporters call it modernization. Critics call it politicization. And that disagreement is unlikely to disappear anytime soon, because every generation rewrites parts of history. Every generation debates which figures deserve recognition, and every generation fights over what national symbols should represent. The Kennedy Center became the latest battlefield in that struggle. For now, the court has spoken. Trump's name must come down, but the broader conflict remains unresolved. because the fight over America's institutions is ultimately a fight over America's identity itself.